We promised you we were going to show you just a little insight into what Sarah Palin is talking about on Oprah Winfrey when that first interview hits on Monday. Oprah took to Twitter to tweet a little video explaining what it was that she asked Sarah Palin about.
We talked about Trig, her baby. We talked about Levi Johnston. We talked about her marriage. We talked about everything. There's nothing that we didn't talk about.
All right, so we're going to hear more from Oprah next week. It's going to be a big Palin week. But in the meantime, we're here with Joan Biskupic, a reporter for USA Today and the author of a brand new book, a really interesting biography of Antonin Scalia. It's called American Original: The Life and Constitution. I love that title, Life and Constitution of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. And Joan, I'm struck by in reading the book and studying Scalia, this as an observer over the years. He is such an outsized presence on this court. He's such a big personality. How does that play itself out? Are we going to be talking about a Scalia court generations from now?
Well, it's so funny you say that, because while you were talking about Sarah Palin, I thought, Sarah Palin will come and go. He's appointed for life. He will endure beyond her and beyond next week, that's for sure. Yes, he came on in 1986 as an appointee of Ronald Reagan. He was this big dissenter. He was always by himself. He was even to the right of Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Most of his message came in dissents beyond the marble walls. Now suddenly he's got votes. He's the one who wrote the majority opinion, giving us for the first time a Second Amendment individual right to handguns, striking down the Washington, D.C. handgun law. So he's gathering steam over these 2 decades, and he's only 73, which in justice years is really very young, very young. So yes, I imagine he's going to be much more of a player on the law each year as we come along, because the next justices who are likely to retire are likely to be the liberals, not the conservatives.
Is he a political animal? You know how the justices, they like to sit up there and sort of remove themselves from the sort of the political debates of the day. I sense with him, he's okay engaging in the political events of the day a little bit.
He actually came up through politics. What a lot of people don't remember is he was a Nixon man. He was around at the time of Watergate, and then he became an assistant attorney general for the Office of Legal Counsel under Gerald Ford. He has a good political instinct. In fact, I remember talking to him around the time of the appointment when President Obama had his first chance to put somebody on the bench. And he said, presidents always want to make a statement. They want the first this, the first that. And indeed, we had the first Latina justice come on, and he himself was the first Italian-American justice.
I'm struck by the debate over abortion this week, because obviously Justice Scalia, a harsh critic of Roe v. Wade, and has warned over the years that this country is going to be dealing with these issues forever, essentially. What do you think he makes of this?
Oh, sort of, I told you so. In fact, he once wrote an abortion opinion, while I'm in a I told you so mode. And it was referring to the fact that these centrist justices, such as Anthony Kennedy and now retired Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, thought that the abortion wars would wane. Well, as we see on this health care bill, they ain't going away. And he has always felt that the reason they're not going away is because Roe v. Wade, despite how Roe v. Wade really has been embraced by America, you know, the right to abortion, despite where you are on the two extremes, that core has remained. But he says since it was settled by the court rather than by the democratic process, that it will always have an illegitimacy that plays into these kinds of debates.
Right. He thinks the debate continues because that decision is not as solid as it may have been.
That's right.
You also wrote a book about Sandra Day O'Connor.
Right.
And I'm wondering, when you cover the court, you've been covering it for years, you look at these 9 people sitting up there, what attracts you to a certain character to say, this one is worth a book?
That's a good question, because it's a killer. You know, you have these day jobs, and then you go home and you're trying to stay married and raise a child and all this, and you're working on these things. But with O'Connor, actually, I always covered politics, frankly. And O'Connor was, to me, the politician on the court. She came up through a state legislature in Arizona. So I was interested in her as a woman who came to Washington knowing how to count votes. Scalia, as you said before, David, has a political side, and I see him as the purest manifestation of the Reagan counter-revolution. O'Connor wasn't. O'Connor was the first woman justice, but Scalia is the guy who's carrying the flame for the for conservatives in a way that socially isn't there as much.
He's also one of the funniest writers in the history of American jurisprudence. I mean, every opinion that he writes is hilarious. He's got zingers, and you know, he's calling people out. There's a role for humor that he sees.
Oh, completely. In fact, and it's deliberate, especially with the dissents. He wants his dissents to be read, and he puts in these zingers. He knows when people are going to respond, and he does that from the bench too. There have been a couple, you know, very un-PC remarks he's made from the bench, and I said to him in our many interviews, you know, what were you thinking when you said that? And he said, well, I didn't have to say it, but it did get attention. So he knows what he's doing. Yeah.
And when an old timer on the court like this deals with a new Chief Justice coming on like John Roberts, do they accept that easily, or does he have a tough time with that kind of shift on the court?
That's a good question. And John Roberts had a leg up in part because they were familiar with him. He had been arguing before the justices, you know, for many, many years, had done something like 39 cases before them. So he had their respect, even though he's essentially almost a generation younger than Justice Scalia, not quite. So there was a little bit of respect already built in.
Right. Well, a fascinating character, a great read. American Original, The Life and Constitution of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Joan Biskupic, appreciate it.
Congratulations on the book. Thank you so much for being here. That does it for this edition of Top Line. Be sure to click us on again tomorrow.
And it's twitter.com/TheNote. Keep the conversation going. And Joan, you don't have, it's liberal or conservative. Like you're saying, people love to read his stuff.
Oh, completely. And I hope they just keep reading and reading and say better than Sarah Palin.
Yeah.